Hey everyone, it's Steve, and I have completed, or at least mostly completed, another section of the modular and scale layout. So let's take a look at how I built this section. Okay, so this video only covers the scenery construction of this module section, the base of which was actually built from a Masterpiece module kit back in part 1. So since this scene was supposed to be a rural farm scene, a key feature of the module was actually a dirt road section. And I had never really modeled dirt roads before, so I had to really kind of go through several different techniques before finally finding something that worked. So I started out using painted sandpaper. That didn't work really well, so I went ahead and painted over that with a layer of white glue. And then I sprinkled on a layer of natural dirt material from Scenic Express. That ended up producing a very realistic looking sort of color and texture, but it was still really too rough and bumpy to be scale for end scale. So I went ahead and tried sanding that, but that still wasn't quite smooth enough for what I was looking for. So I went ahead and actually mixed up a layer of the dirt material with white glue and a little bit of paint, and then applied that with a putty knife across the entire dirt road area to try to get a nice smooth texture for those road areas. And while I did produce a nice smooth finish for the road, it actually ended up being a little bit too smooth looking and didn't really have a natural looking color and texture that you would normally see. So I went ahead and brushed on some weathering powders and more dirt material, brushed off the excess, and then sealed that with some dull coat, which produced a nice looking road surface. So at that point I went ahead and applied masking tape across all the areas I wanted to be protected, and went ahead and brushed on some more white glue so I could then apply the various other scenery materials such as ground foam and static grass across the module section, and then soak that with more glue. But unfortunately, when I pulled off the masking tape, I had seen that the glue had actually soaked underneath the tape, leaving behind some glossy areas from the white glue. And so I ended up having to redo the road sections one more time, and so I sifted the dirt material using a T-strainer a few times to kind of remove all the coarsest granules and leaving only more of the fine powdery dirt. And then I brushed on a thin layer of white glue across all the areas that I wanted to have as dirt road sections, and then sifted on the dirt material one more time on that white glue. I didn't soak it with any additional glue once the dirt was in place. I just basically left the layer of glue on the bottom there to hold it in place. And then once all that was dry, I vacuumed off the excess, and I was left with a very nice, smooth, natural looking road across the entire module, which I was pretty happy with. So from there I went ahead and glued on the structures. We used an American Model Builder's barn kit we built, and we also used a built and ready Woodland Scenic's Granny's house for the farm building. Went ahead and ballasted the track using some Scenic Express ballast, which is a sort of a natural sand type material, so it does stay down pretty well. It doesn't float like some of the other ballast materials do that are lightweight. And then added some more trees and other various scenery materials around the layout section. I went ahead and touched up some additional areas with some more ground foam, some more static grass, especially around the structures, along the edges of the roads, trying to get that to look more realistic. Sprinkled on a mixture of ground foam and static grass that I had mixed together in a cup, and then just kind of used my fingers to kind of sprinkle that in there and create sort of a natural looking edge to the road surface that wasn't quite so linear and crisp, which I had initially. Now, and another key feature of this farm section, since it did have livestock, was barbed wire fencing. And so I had to go through and come up with a nice barbed wire fence for the section. Okay, now for the fence post that I'm doing on this layout, I was trying to find something that was about the right scale size that I could use. So I have these tiny Q-tip-like swabs that I picked up from the hobby shop. And so what I'm using are the stems of these swabs. So all I am doing is taking these swabs, obviously cutting off the ends which aren't needed, and then trying to cut these roughly to the size that I'll be needing for the fence posts. I'm cutting them something on the order of 10 scale feet or so in length, and then I can adjust them as needed later. And since of course I'll be drilling holes for these posts, the actual height will be somewhat less than what the cut length is. So I'll put a few more in there. And then, so I'm just putting them in this little bowl here, and I'm using to stain them this Hunterline Cordova Brown weathering mix, which I picked up a number of years ago. And this weathering mix is alcohol based and does dry pretty quickly. So I just put some in there in the little container. switched it around, and then I just let it sit for a while. And you can see here what the final product looks like. It's sort of a weathered, grayish, wood-looking color, and that's pretty much what I'm using for the fence posts. Then it's simply a matter of drilling the holes for each of the posts with a drill bit that's the same size, and then I just use a little bit of glue in each one and hold it in there. And they're quite strong. It's stronger than it would be if it was just you know, an actual thin wooden dowel. And so it does make for a very sturdy fence post. I also added some additional details, including some cows I picked up from Woodland Scenics. Once the fence posts were all put in place, it was time to actually add the barbed wire itself. And so to simulate the barbed wire on the fence itself, I used a thin gray thread, and essentially I just tied it to the end post on the back side of the module, and then went along and looped the thread around each post one time. Got to the other end, came back, and basically went back and forth 3 times with the thread, applying a little bit of CA here and there to keep the thread in place and prevent it from coming off the posts. But for the most part, pretty simple procedure of just winding the thread back and forth along each of the fence posts. And the end result was pretty realistic looking. For the front of the farm scene itself, I only used 2 rows of the thread to simulate sort of a 2-row barbed wire fence. And again, same technique, just wrap the thread around each post independently, and then added a little bit of glue to keep it from coming off later on. And that, again, also produced a pretty nice looking fence for the front of the farm scene. So anyway, with that is more or less the completed module section. I do have a few more details to add, including some road signs, some additional farm equipment, you know, hay bales, that kind of thing, which will eventually get added in. But for the most part, this is the completed farm scene on the module. So that's all for now, and thanks for watching. Bye.